word apologetic comes from a Greek word which literally means to give a rational, illogical defense of our faith, right? Because sometimes it seems like things like rationality and logic and faith are juxtaposed, they're opposites. But in actual fact, they're not. And so if you're here and you're a Christ follower, my hope, my aim over the next 4 weeks is that you will get some amazing content, some amazing perspective that will both encourage your faith, but also equip you when you're in conversation with friends around coffee machines or buses or trains or planes or at home with your family, that you'll be able to engage in a rational conversation about why you believe what you believe. If, of course, you're a skeptic, then what we're doing is we're answering skeptics' challenges, skeptics' problems to Christianity. So if you're here and you're a skeptic, again, you're very welcome. We're so glad that you are here. And maybe you're on the fringe and you're wondering, you're questioning and you're debating and you're doubting. Well, this series is also specifically for you, as we're going to jump into some of the biggest challenges. In fact, even though, like I said, we're going to do, there's lots of different ways we could look at this. Over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to look at 4 topics, the 4 major topics for why some would say, I don't believe in Christianity, I'm a skeptic, I'm an atheist, I believe in other things or whatever. And they, are, of course, are science, which I'm going to tackle today. I don't believe in Christianity because I believe in science. And next week, I don't believe in Christianity because I don't believe in the Bible. The Bible is a bunch of people who got together and wanted to create a religion, so they wrote this book and they manufactured it just to steal people's money. I'm going to tackle that one. Week 3, I'm going to look at the problem of evil and suffering. The problem being, well, if God is good and God exists, then why do good people suffer? Why is there death? Why is there so much suffering in the world? I'm going to tackle that in week 3. And then week 4, heads up, week 4 is going to be R-rated. We're going to talk about sex, baby. That's right, just you and me and everyone else in the room. And we're going to look at, I don't believe in God or the Bible because, sex is outdated and I don't really care about philosophy or science or theology. I just want to have sex with whoever I want to have sex with. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit in week 4. Today, then, I want to kick off by looking at the whole subject of science. I don't believe in Christianity because I believe in science. And again, everything that we're going to cover today, next 4 weeks, we're going to tackle this from a rational, a logical point of view. I'm going to really be challenging your thinking. And a lot of the content I'm using comes from a book that a great friend of mine wrote called The Problem of God. I want to encourage everyone in this room to buy this book. You can buy the hard copy. You can download it to Kindle. Mark Clark is a very good friend of mine, pastors an amazing church called Village Church in the city of Vancouver, Canada. And Mark actually was on his way to becoming a college professor when he felt God called him to start a church. And now, a couple of years later, and 7,500 people who go to his church in Vancouver, he's helping a bunch of people tackle problems like this. So again, if you want to go deeper, so we're going to base the Connect group off of, and of course, you can buy the book for yourself. Today, though, I want to talk about the problem of science. The problem of science. Each one of these sessions, these messages, we're going to be tackling a problem. Now, what do I mean when I say the problem of science? What is the problem? Well, the word problem is defined in the English dictionary as a question raised for inquiry or clarification. A question raised for the purpose of finding a solution. It's an intricate or unsettled question. So when we say the problem of science, the problem of the Bible, what we're saying is we're wrestling, we want to get clarity around this question. Are things like faith and science and church and the Bible and the real world technology, are these things opposites, or can they indeed coexist? Or even more importantly, can they complement each other? And again, this is really important to me because you may think, oh, here's this guy, a pastor, whatever that means. Maybe I was raised into this faith. Maybe my parents taught me. Maybe I used to go to church, a church like this. It's very important for you to understand as you listen to me today that I did not come from a church background, okay? I was not raised in this. I wasn't taught this. I wasn't indoctrinated into some weird cult. In case you're wondering if this is a cult, it's not. How do you know if it's not a cult? Because I just told you. Hello. In fact, I came from a nominal religious background like most Irish people. I was an altar boy as a kid. I made my first Holy Communion. I made my confirmation. Of course, none of it meant anything to me except for making money. Hello. And so by the time I was a teenager, I didn't believe in God. No one believed in God. Why would you believe in God? God was a lot of nonsense. It was a religious system. And I was very skeptical and I was very suspicious. And I was very judgmental and very critical of Christians, of the Christian message, of the church, of people who had faith. In other words, I myself was a skeptic, and I came through faith, not because someone forced me or coerced me or taught me or raised me, but it actually was my skeptical questions that led me to my faith in Christ. I began my journey. I never forget, sharing with my wife, who's one of the primary people who influenced me in my faith. That time she wasn't my wife, of course. I remember saying, I don't believe in Christianity. I can't believe in the Christian message because I believe in science. I believe in logical, rational thinking. I believe in technology. And I went to biology class once in secondary school. You know what I'm saying? And my teacher taught me things like evolution. And even though it was a theory, no one wanted to accept that fact. We taught it as if it was 100% gospel truth, as the expression goes. And so I can't believe in what you believe in because I believe, of course, in science. As if the two were opposite to each other. And there came a point in my kind of investigative approach to Christianity that I began to realize the more I tried to disprove Christianity, the more I proved it true to myself. The more I looked at history and really got into the things of science, and as I looked at academic papers, and as I really got my teeth into this. In fact, I was so intrigued with it that even though I was planning to go off and study psychology, I decided to give my life to studying theology because I wanted to get deeper into this thing. And after 5 years of college, one thing became crystal clear to me. Science does not disprove Christianity. In fact, as we're going to see today, science is actually one of the major provers or proofs of Christianity. And that really surprised me because here am I, this simple faith, putting my trust in Jesus because secretly my life was a mess, even though outwardly all things seemed to be intact. And I had made this massive discovery, and I watched all my friends, all my peers, people who are now my age in their early 30s who reject the Christian message, reject faith as a whole because they believe that they've evolved, or we're rational people, where we believe in science, but in actual fact that is not true. And so what I did was I decided to devote my life to help people find faith in Jesus in a relevant new way. That's why we're having church in a cinema, people, and not in some old building, because it's new and it's different. It's why we have a rock band leading us to God's presence and not an organ. You with me? We do things we do because we want people to experience Christianity in a relevant way, but also because I believe that for Ireland, for us as a nation, God is not done with us yet. And we have not evolved or outgrown our need for faith. So I wanted to confront, and this is what I want to do today. I want to challenge, I want to wrestle with these questions, and I want to confront these myths, because they are myths. Especially this myth that if I believe in science, I cannot believe in God. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break them down to 4 parts. I'm going to look at science and secularism. I'm going to look at atheism versus theism. I'm going to look at the science and the church, and I'm going to look at faith versus evolution. So, number 1, here we go. Science and secularism. What is secularism? Well, secularism, of course, is where we find ourselves today. Ireland is a secular nation. Secularism basically says there is no God. There is no spirituality. There is nothing beyond this. What you feel, what you see, what you taste, what you can buy, that is reality. There is no God, therefore there is no spirituality. All things are physical. And how we end up in this Western secular world actually has its roots in the Enlightenment of the 18th century, where people began to believe that because of the Industrial Revolution, because of science and art and all these things, that we should distance ourselves from the things of faith. And many of the philosophical departments in universities, especially in the turn of this century, or the last century, I should say, the 20th century, began to expose thoughts that God is dead and we've no more need for God. And because we have, homes and we have doctors and we have medicine and we have the internet, therefore, clearly, we've outgrown our need for a puny little faith that didn't exist for any reason other than to give us comfort and hope, a residue of our evolution as human beings. And so the prediction was, at the turn of the 20th century, was that one day the world would completely outgrow its need for all spirituality, and the educated and the rich and those in arts would become completely secularized, and faith would eventually diminish into these little small pockets where it would cease to exist at all. The problem, of course, with that belief, that prediction, is that it's completely untrue. People now in 21st century Ireland are just as, if not even more, spiritual than ever before. Of course, it may not take its form in the traditional sense of going to a church, but people are open. People are meditating. People are looking for inner peace. People are communicating with the afterlife. All these thoughts are spiritual thoughts. Famous actors like Jim Carrey believes in the afterlife. He painted a portrait of Jesus. He called it his masterpiece. Ace Ventura, meditates. Think about that for a second. In fact, not only was the prediction completely untrue, it's backfired. People are more spiritual now than ever before, not just in culture. What's really important to understand is that our culture, very often, how we see the world, is influenced by how, especially when it comes to philosophy, by debates and points of view that take place in university. Universities, of course, shape culture. They shape the world. And at the beginning of the 20th century, most philosophical departments in universities were becoming more and more secularized as more and more people are jumping on the bandwagon. What's important for you to note today, friends, is that this is changing. In fact, listen to a quote from Quentin Smith, who is one of the most famous secular atheist philosophers in the world. He's talking about what he actually was ranting and complaining, but what he was observing in the current university world in America. He said, the field of philosophy is being de-secularized across universities in America. 1/4 to 1/3 of the philosophy departments now consist of theists. A theist is someone who believes in God. Generally, Christians. What he's saying is he's ranting the fact that what's happening to our beloved philosophy departments that for so long shaped a secular world. It seems like more and more people, the deeper they get into philosophy, are actually becoming theists, generally Christians. And of course, this is in response to the fact that the world's most renowned living philosopher right now is a guy called Alvin Plantinga, and he is actually a Christ follower, a Christian. And he is arguing apologetically for the fact that as we look into the meaning of life and the purpose of life, these things don't point us away from God, but actually point us toward God. It's the same thing another philosopher by the name of David Bentley Hart said in this next quote. He said, I do not regard true philosophical atheism. Where's the guys? Give me my quote. There we go. No, go back one. I do not regard true philosophical atheism as an intellectually valid or even cogent position. In fact, I see as fundamentally an irrational view of reality, which can be sustained only by a tragic absence of curiosity or a reverently resolute will not to believe in the absurd. Next line. The case for belief in God is inductively so much stronger than the case for unbelief that true philosophical atheism must be regarded as a superstition. Wow, how the tables have turned. 100 years ago, it was the opposite, but now more and more philosophers are saying it seems irrational, it seems ridiculous, basically, to have a logical view for what they call philosophical atheism. Why? Because the more you understand the world, the more you understand people, the more you understand how this thing all works, the more you understand science, the more it becomes clear that something or someone is out there, and there is, of course, design to our reality. What he's saying here, Bentley Hart, is that atheism must be regarded as a superstition. Meaning what he's inferring is that you need to have faith to be an atheist. You can't say, I have no faith, I'm an atheist. No, because we believe, again, rational, logical, right? Therefore, what I believe must be grounded in truth. I must be able to prove what I believe in. Well, I would challenge you, friend, prove to me there is no God. Show me your evidence. Show me what you have. Show me the tangible results of your observations and prove to me there is no God, because I can prove to you there is a God. Yeah. I can give you evidence, as we're going to unpack today and throughout the weeks, that there is in fact some kind of being, person, which we believe to be God out there that have, of course, put all this thing together. Wow. This is very important to me. Why? Because my spiritual journey began with the pursuit of proof. I wanted proof. Show me this Christ. Show me this reality. Show me what you claim to be true. And of course, as I began to look at history, and as I began to look at all these things, I began to realize there was this mounting argument against my belief to say, actually, there's a lot of coherence, there's a lot of proof to suggest that Jesus Christ did in fact exist. He was a real person. He did in fact die. There are eyewitnesses who did see him rise from the dead. The effect worldwide. I mean, here we are in Dublin, Ireland, 2,000 years later, talking about a man who died in Jerusalem, a teacher, a rabbi, who if he was just some normal man, we shouldn't be here. But if he was the Son of God, it changes everything. And it wasn't until I personally, while playing rugby in Germany, said, right, enough is enough. I challenge you, God. If you're there, show me some proof. And in an instant, all of a sudden, I felt his presence. And if I can be honest with you, I said, oh, no. I wasn't happy. I was wrong. I don't like being wrong. I was like, oh no, this is so messed up. This can't be happening. I didn't freak out. I just put one step after the next step and next steps. We have a whole thing called Next Steps on this journey of faith. But my journey began with the pursuit of proof. And even though all these years later, here I am a pastor, I'm still looking for proof. I'm still open to dialogue and conversation. Because I'm not threatened by the fact that science and these things are out there. Why? Because I believe in rather than disproving, they're actually proving. And so what we see in the philosophical departments, the thinking of universities worldwide, is more and more people. Famous names like Jordan P. Peterson, who's not necessarily a Christ follower, but he's a theist. Who right now, he's gone viral actually on the internet. Why? Because he's proving the fact that there must be something out there. To believe in nothing is no longer an intellectually valid position, rationally, logically, scientifically speaking. And so we see that, as we look at our culture, secularism and science are not moving us away from Christianity, but are possibly pointing us towards Christianity. Now, moving on to atheism versus theism. To be an atheist means, like I said, we believe in nothing. There's nothing out there. Everything is material. Everything is physical. To be a theist means not necessarily a Christian, but I believe there is a God. I believe there is something out there. The reason why most people would say I'm an atheist, not a theist, is because, of course, I have doubt. I doubt the existence of God. I doubt the existence of a creator. I doubt the existence of these things. But atheists would also say that, I'm not a person of faith. But hold on a second. If you doubt the existence of something, it's because you must believe in something else, right? You can't just doubt in a vacuum. If you told me you won an Olympic gold medal and I doubted you, it's because I believe something else. You come along and you say, yeah, I won the Olympic gold medal for sprinting. It's like, bro, my granny could outrun you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen you run. It's ugly. You shouldn't run. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. But my doubt must only be possible because I believe something. I have faith that something else must be true. Doubt, thus, is a belief. It is a worldview. It is a paradigm that even skeptics have, because to not believe in something must point to a belief in something else. As Tim Keller says, famous author and reverend of Presbyterian Church in New York, he said, doubts in essence are simply an alternative set of beliefs. Doubt is not just doubt. Doubt in itself is a belief. And all of us have doubts. Even as Christ followers, say I have no doubt is ridiculous. We're always challenged by the reality in which we live. The question is what do I believe in my doubt? Does my doubt put me toward God, or does my doubt put me away from God? The challenge is with many of us in our society, especially in Ireland, is that we don't know what we believe. Go back to our atheist slide. We don't know what we believe. We say we're atheists, but when I talk to most people who are atheists, this is not being disrespectful. As I try to actually logically, rationally understand what they believe, it becomes very clear to me that most people don't know what they believe. They watched a movie or, watched your favorite show, Big Bang Theory, and heard a couple of lines, and they quote them back to you, and you go, what does that mean? What do you actually believe? And people don't know, and then they get really flustered and feel awkward, and then they try to avoid the conversation. Why? Because people don't want to have to ask the difficult questions. People don't want to go to funerals. They don't want to deal with the reality of death and morality and life and our existence. They're just happy just going to a nightclub on a Friday night and getting drunk and hanging out with friends and waking up late Saturday and buying some ice cream and don't want to have to wrestle with these questions. These questions are so important to our life, to our existence, to our time on earth. And what's happening, what happens to all of us, what happened to me, is that many of us have this intentional blindness, like a horse wears those blinders, We have this blindness to questions of meaning and purpose and spirituality. And not only that, but some of us are actually blind to our blindness. Does that make sense? We don't even realize that we're blind. We're so, as the expression goes, ignorance is bliss. We think we're enjoying life so much that we're blind to our own ignorance. And this became true. I remember a pastor friend telling me a story of this nurse, and she was a Christ follower, and she wanted to help people in hospitals because, of course, the hospital was a Christian invention. It was Christians that started the concept of hospitals. People give their lives to serve the sick. And this nurse who had this noble cause to go help people in a hospital was told by her peers and doctors, you must not bring faith into the workplace. They must be separate. You cannot bring your beliefs, your theism, into the reality of what you see here. It's off limits, it's prohibited, it's not allowed. And of course, she wrestled with this, but she did what needs to be done because that was the way things are. And one day, this particular man, he was dying and on life support, and the doctors gathered around and a few nurses in the room and decided, what should we do? And eventually they made the decision to pull the plug and allow the man to die. And then they began making these statements just out loud. Oh, well, at least he's not suffering anymore. He's now in a better place. We know now he's at peace. To which she began to ask the question, how do you know these things? How do you know he's not suffering anymore? How do you know he's at peace? How do you know? How does someone who say they have no faith make faith statements like that? You told me I can't bring my belief into the workplace, but you're telling me this man is okay. That's a faith statement. Someone they doubt this, but they believe this. And they make simple statements to remove the awkwardness and pain of the very real question, where is that man gone? And is he really not suffering anymore? And the challenge that many of us in our workplace, our schools, with our friends, we find ourselves in that position as theists, as Christ followers. We find it awkward and difficult to talk about these meaningful things, but people who claim to be atheists make faith statements every day. Happiness, joy, hope. These things aren't material things. They're metaphysical things. Beyond what we see, beyond what is real. Things of the soul. Richard Lewitton, who's a Harvard biologist, he said this. He said, we have a prior commitment to materialism. So he's speaking to science, and he's talking about how scientists have a blindness. An intentional blindness. He says, we have a prior commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but, next slide, on the contrary, we are forced by a priori adherence to material causes for which we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. Harvard biologist, what's he saying? He's saying that what's driving his science and the science of all his peers is not fact, but philosophy. He's saying we cannot allow ourselves to open the door this much to the possibility of God. Why? Because we might be wrong. We have made a biased commitment against all things spiritual and metaphysical. Our science is intentional. This is a Harvard professor, people, on paper, quoted, saying we will not allow ourselves to see the potential of a divine hand in creation. We're against it. We're closed. We're intentionally blind to it. Now again, this is very important. Why? Because it's important we understand how science and philosophy shapes our world. But it's important to understand also there is a bias against all things spiritual. And we got to be clear about this bias. We got to be clear about our own biases. In this series, I'm obviously biased because I've said that I believe in Christ. But what we're looking for is I'm not trying to reinforce what we believe with more Bible verses. I want to have a rational, logical, scientific, coherent conversation with you as a church to equip you to say, hey, these things aren't against us. These things actually point to what we believe. And that we should look at reasonable evidence, not just what we were led to believe. My question for you today, friend, whether you're a skeptic or a Christ follower or an atheist or wherever you are spiritually, all of us have blind spots. My question to you is, are you aware of your blind spot? My question to you is, what blindness are you blind to? Where have you shut down or shut off the possibility of conversation because you want to be blind? It reminds me of a story I heard years ago. I remember, 15 years ago, I was at this meeting and there's this visiting speaker and he was telling a story about how he had, I don't know if he'd come across this person or if he'd heard the story himself, but one Christmas, this family were gathering around for Christmas Day, and the mother was making the Christmas turkey, and her 4-year-old child came in and observed that as she was getting ready to put the turkey in the tray in the oven, she chopped off the 2 turkey legs and tossed them to the side. Which the daughter said, "Mom, why do you cut off the turkey legs?" To which she said, "Well, I don't really know." And she said, well, why don't you leave them on? And she goes, "No, that's the way I was taught." And so the 3-year-old thought, well, why? And the mother goes, "I don't know. Let's go ask Gran." And so, later that day, Gran came over to the house and they said, "Let me ask you a question. When you make turkey, how do you make it?" And she goes, "Well, I chop both legs off, put it in the tray, and I put it in the oven." And she goes, "Why?" And the Gran goes, "I don't know why." And she goes, "What do you mean you don't know why?" She goes, "Well, that's the way my mother did it." I said, "Okay, let's go see Great Granny." So now the daughter, the mother, and the granny all go see Great Granny. And so they all huddle around Great Granny. She's like 150 years old, and They say, well, we have a very important question. She says, why? How do you prepare turkey? She goes, well, I put it in the tray, took the legs off, put it in the oven. They go, well, why? I said, well, because when I was growing up, we couldn't afford a tray big enough, so we used to always chop the legs off and toss them. Yeah, it's funny, right? But it shows about our blindness. We just accept things because they are the way they are without questioning why. Why? And God is not intimidated by our questioning. He's not going to fall off his throne if we start asking difficult questions. He can handle them. So number 3 then, let's move on and talk about science versus the church. Well, clearly, science and church are at odds with each other. The church is this old religious traditional thing, and I've been taught that the church historically, tried to stop science, the progress of science, and the church got in the way of science and tried to stop people from knowing truth, because if they did, of course, they would leave the church. And although sadly the church has a very, very bad past, there's been lots of abuses and neglect, and a lot of bad things have happened in the history of the church. Despite all those things being true, what is not true is that the church was against science. In fact, when you look historically at some of the biggest and greatest scientific breakthroughs and where they came from, most of them, of course, came from Christians. Historically speaking, the church has been a friend of science. What's very important for you to know today, friend, is that the argument of faith versus science, or science versus the church, is no longer taken seriously in the academic world. That belief, that worldview, that faith position, because that's what it is, that somehow the church and faith is against science, is no longer accepted by academics. And more academics, philosophers, scientists, biologists, cosmologists are coming to the conclusion that what our science is teaching us is that the Christian worldview, not necessarily to believe in Christ or the Bible or Jesus, but the Christian worldview more and more is being proven accurate by what science is discovering. In fact, one scientist by the name of Kenneth Richard, he wrote an article about the variables of creation, and he said it can be argued in so many regards that Christianity actually birthed the pursuit of science. Why? Because let's go back to the Greek-Roman belief structure of gods. There's a hurricane. People are dying. Why? Poseidon's angry. He's stirring up his anger. Okay, let's go sacrifice some children. Not very conducive to studying what a hurricane really is, right? Book of Genesis. I've created the world for your enjoyment. Go fulfill it, subdue it, understand it, manage it, take care of it. It's yours. There's a hurricane. I wonder how that works. It's almost like God is inviting us to study the world and understand, these things. And it's almost like he's left it kind of an open door for questioning. What about more of a Buddhist view? Well, God's in animals. Well, you can't really butcher a cow and study it if you believe the cow is God, can you? You just killed God in the name of science. Hello? No, all throughout history, some of the most famous scientists, as I mentioned in a few minutes, actually were of a faith position. They saw that faith pushed them, invited them, provoked them to understand the world that God had created. Like I said, in his article, Kenneth Richard, he said he gives 10 reasons, 10 variables from the Christian perspective that actually point to science. Here they are real quick. I'm going to go through all 10. He says, for example, the Christian belief system says the physical universe is a distinct objective reality. Science has proven that to be true. Number 2, he says the laws of nature exhibit order, patterns, and regularity. The Bible shows that to be true. Number 3, he says the laws of nature are uniform for the physical universe. Science believes that. Well, guess where it came from? The Bible. Number 4, the physical universe is intelligible. Wow. Tick that also. Number 5, he says the world is good, valuable, and worthy. Hold on a second. Why should we care about the environment? Why is the world good? Who said it was good? If we're all just evolving as a species, why should we care? The only thing we should be concerned with is our genetic code getting into the next genetic gene pool, right? Why do we think the world is good and valuable? Why do we care if the Amazon is burning? Where does that belief come from? Well, the Christian Bible tells that God created the world and he made it good. And he charged humanity as custodians to take care of it. Science proves to be true. Number 6, here we go. The world is not divine and therefore is not a proper object of worship, but in fact, rational. This is huge. The world is not divine. The world was made by divine hands. The world matters. The world is good. The world is valuable, but the world is not God. Therefore, it is worthy of rational study. We should understand the waves. We should understand the mountains. We understand biology. Why? Because it was made on purpose for a purpose. Number 7. Human beings possess the ability to discover the universe's intelligibility. In other words, we shouldn't just bask in our ignorance. We should be, again, like I said, provoked to understand this amazing universe and world that God has put us in. Number 8, he says this: the free agency of the Creator makes the empirical method necessary. In other words, there is an order to what we have. There's an order to reality. And therefore, as we try to study and understand this order, we have an empirical, a hierarchical, a process to understand how all these things work. Like, for example, the scientific method. Number 9. God encourages, even propels science through his imperative to humans to take dominion over nature. And finally, number 10, he says this. He says the intellectual virtues essential to carrying out scientific enterprise are part of God's moral law. The church is not against science. The church has been encouraging and provoking and leading people to scientific quest since the creation of the world. Not just generally, but did you know the university, the concept of university, unity in diversity is where the word university came from, was founded and created by the church, by Christ followers. It was a 12th century Christian invention. Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Trinity College Dublin, all founded by Christians. Well, that doesn't make sense. I thought the church was against science. Why would the church open up universities, biology, zoology, cosmology? Why would the church do this if it was against, unless I'm blind to my blindness, what I believe to be true is not true at all? But my whole life, my whole worldview has been staked on this perspective. Maybe your faith position is misinformed, friend. Famous scientists like Augustine, Aquinas, Wycliffe, Copernicus, Francis Bacon, who, in case you're wondering, didn't invent bacon, but instead invented the scientific method by which all things scientifically are evaluated, all had faith in God and saw their pursuit of science as part of their worship. The church is not against science. The church encourages it. Why? Because it understands this world was formed by the hands of God, a great creator, a designer. And part of our worship of him is understanding and appreciating the complexity and the beauty and the amazing way that he formed this universe for us. The church is not against science. The church is for it because science points to God. Fourth and lastly, probably the most controversial one of today, evolution. I don't believe in God or Christianity or anything because I believe in evolution, which again, you have to understand when you say I believe in evolution, two things. One, that's a faith position. You believe in it. It's a belief, okay? Number two, you can't just say you believe in evolution because we're talking rationally, right? We're talking logically. So to believe in evolution, you must be able to prove evolution. To disprove my faith that is, not in alignment with evolution, you must disprove me by proving what you believe to be true. And most of the world, I can remember being like a 15-year-old secondary school student. I did not believe in God. I had no interest in God. I was totally against God. Listen, I used to laugh at Christians. Me and my buddies, we'd hang out like 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd turn God TV on, watch all these ridiculous evangelist preachers with their suits and their big Bibles and talk about money. And we would mock them. We would sit there and laugh and, mock them and, all this stuff, like texting and just messing and all this kind of stuff. Like, I was so far away from God. And yet I can remember being in school. I remember my teacher, basically teaching us evolution. I remember asking the question, but according to the scientific method, evolution is simply a theory, right? Well, yes, but it's actually fact. But where is the evidence? I'm a very curious person. Where are the half fossil forms? Where's the half donkey, half human? Like, show me this. I want to see it. I'm so excited. Show me these mutated fossils. Or if you go to some random island in the Pacific where we find some half human, half monkeys. I remember being 15 and I'm being shocked that there was absolutely no proof whatsoever. I was thinking, this is kind of strange how everyone just believes in this. when there's no evidence to show it to be true. And this is what I've learned. Evolution, it takes more faith to believe in evolution than it does to believe in Jesus Christ. We have evidence. The church is alive all over the world. Millions. Are we all mad? Why is church still here? Why are we all here? Why do rational, educated people like me believe in Jesus? We have evidence. Show me one fossil of a half human, half monkey. Anything. It takes more faith to believe in evolution than it does to believe in Jesus Christ. Evolution is a faith position, not a science position. It's a faith. It's a religion. And you're entitled to it. Don't be wrong. Who am I to say what you believe or shouldn't believe? But you have to understand it is a faith position. Why? First cause hasn't been proven. The complexity of the human eye cannot be explained. No fossil record. No transitional forms. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on scientifically for why more and more academics are moving away from evolution as a scientific position. In fact, Stephen Gould, who is like one of the most celebrated evolutionary paleontologists in the last generation and a self-declared atheist, he said this. He said the extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. The evolutionary tree that adorns our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches. The rest, watch this for a confession. The rest is inference. Do you know what inference is? Fill in the blank. Make up whatever you want. Inference. Dead space. Noise. This is one of the most celebrated evolutionists, paleontologists of the last generation. He is saying that the extreme rarity is a secret. And the rest is the entire tree is completely, people stake their lives on this faith position. And the people at the forefront say it's inference. I'm not saying it's inference. He is saying of himself, and I believe it is inference. An entire generation has built its worldview, not in fact, not in science, but in inference. And this is your worldview. I'm challenging you to think. I'm challenging you to the blindness that you have. And asking you to ask yourself, what if you're wrong? I mean, as a Christian pastor, I've asked myself many times, what if I'm wrong? What if all this somehow is like not true? I thought, well, okay, what's the worst that could happen? You know, live a good life, moral, raise some good kids, good cause, help a whole bunch of people. But if you're of this faith position, what if you're wrong? What if God is real? What if heaven and hell do exist? What if when you die you don't go to peace necessarily? What if those faith statements are based on nothing but inference? Then what? Just asking rationally, scientifically. Then what? You see, we're told that faith has no evolutionary benefit. I mean, if evolution was true, then why does faith persist? Some people say, well, faith is the remnant of when we were cavemen and we were all scared and we needed something to believe in, so we drew a picture on a wall and we all worshipped it, and that's how faith began. So faith is nothing more than a spiritual crutch that weak people need to survive the world, but higher, more intellectual, stronger people have outgrown their need for faith, and therefore that's the explanation of why faith exists. But that makes no sense. Why? Because faith has no evolutionary benefit. The charge of Christianity that one man should lay down his life for another, even when he doesn't deserve it, makes no evolutionary sense whatsoever. The idea that we're encouraged as Christians to sacrifice ourselves in order to help other people, that has no logical, rational benefit in the evolutionary model whatsoever. In fact, it flies in the face of evolution. Why? Because we're told that, again, our number one job in evolution is to pass on our genes. That really, what we believe, it's rational. And when Darwin began, this journey of discovery, and obviously he's the father of evolution, one of the traps that he found himself in was that if you believe that faith and spirituality and God have no purpose and everything is the mind, well, if our mind, our higher mind, has evolved from a lower mind, in other words, our mind is that of a monkey, then can we trust our mind to believe what we believe in? Follow me. So we say we believe in evolution, but can we trust what we believe in because our mind comes from that of a monkey? Who would trust a monkey? Here, take my kids and watch them for 4 hours. We can't. And in fact, this is documented in Darwin's journal. It's called Darwin's Doubt. Watch what he says. It's Charles Darwin's own confession. Within me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of a man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind? Meaning what he's saying of himself is that even if I believe in evolution, can I believe in it? Can I trust the mind that I believe has evolved from that of a monkey? You see, Darwin, he was doing what we call observational science. He was looking at the fact that a monkey looks like a man, and this reptile looks like that reptile. It was all external and observational. Fast forward the clock a couple hundred years, and now science has evolved from being purely observational into origin science. Now we're mapping the human genome, people. Now we're looking at DNA. We're looking at human code, genetic code. We're looking out into the universe, and we're seeing planets and stars and galaxies that we could never see before. And this is very important. Why? Because what we're seeing in origin science, what we're seeing as we look at the human genome, is that the human genetic code has been created with order, with structure. There is like literally the person who is charged with mapping the human genome. After mapping the human genome, he wrote a book. You know what the book is called? The Language of God. What did he discover? He discovered that what you study, when you look at how we're wired, is someone made us. If there's a design, there's a designer. For example, a couple weeks ago, we brought some friends to Glendalough. Glendalough is one of our favorite places to go with the family. Photo, guys, please. And this is Glendalough. It's beautiful. When you stand at the upper lake Glendalough and you look at that valley, you see nature, right? Glaciers moved through the world and tore the mountain rocks and da-da-da-da, right? Nature. But when you walk a couple of 100 meters down the road, you see a round tower, right? So, round tower, please, guys. Round tower, there we go. So when you look at a round tower, you don't go, nature created that. Like the wind blew these rocks and they all fell in perfect order with a doorway and a window and this kind of roof, right? You go, designer, nature, creator. This happened because of, all the things that happened with glaciers and the movement of earth and so on. But someone built this. See, when you look at observational science, you go, nature. But when you find a rock washed up on the beach, you go, nature. When you find an arrowhead, you go, creator. Someone made this. The valley in Glendalough, nature, the round tower, a higher form. Something designed this. There is mind behind this matter. This didn't just happen. Someone created it. And more in biology and cosmology and history departments all throughout the university and the world, people are coming to this conclusion as we look deeper and further ever before, that there is a higher form. There is a designer behind our design. Robert Jastow, who is a very celebrated astronomer and agnostic, he said this. He said, "We now see how the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world." Doesn't even believe in God. He's looking out at the stars and he goes, we now see astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the world. That the chain of events leading to humankind commence suddenly and sharply at a definite moment in time, in a flash of light and energy. Next slide. The scientist's pursuit of the past ends in exceedingly strange development, unexpected by all except theologians. People study God. That there are what I or anyone can call, Mr. Nell, supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. Not theory, fact. Proven fact. Agnostic, non-Christian scientist. Fact. This is so important. Why? Because there's a principle in the scientific world called the Norma Principle, which basically says M-O-M-A, says that physics can't disprove metaphysics. The word meta in Greek is to go beyond, above. In other words, physics are what's real, what we can touch, what's tangible. Metaphysics are also real, but we can't put their hands on them. And what we're seeing is that physics can't disprove metaphysics. Science, in other words, cannot disprove God's existence. Because science is primarily concerned what's physical, what's real, what's tangible. Yet as we look deeper and further before, we see somehow there's some kind of supernatural force at work that drives our science. See, even science has its limits. Let's go back to Stephen Jay Gould, the Harvard professor of zoology. He says this: nature just is. Where's my slide, guys? Nature just is. In all her complexity and diversity, in all her sublime indifference to our desires. Therefore, we cannot use nature for our moral instruction or for answering any question within the magisterium of religion. To say it for my colleagues and for the umpteenth millionth time, science cannot, by its legitimate methods, adjudicate the issue of God's superintendence or nature. We neither affirm nor deny it. We simply cannot comment on it as scientists. Scary, isn't it? How blind we are to our blindness. And we stake our whole life on something. It's not even true. In conclusion, Alistair McGrath, Oxford professor, what does he say? He says, the idea that science and religion are in perpetual conflict is no longer taken seriously by any major historian or should be scientist. One of the last remaining bastions of atheism survives only at a popular level. You know what popular means? Lower. Popular culture. That's us, by the way. Namely, the myth that an atheistic, fact-based science is permanently at war with a faith-based religion. Complete, utter, total nonsense. Church is not against science, and science is not against faith. They're not at war with each other, they complement each other. And you know, the Apostle Paul, he saw this coming. And 2,000 years ago, when he wrote the book of Romans, here's what he said. He said, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen. What is science? It's clearly seeing what God has already made. It may be even explaining to a degree how he made it. That's what science is. Being understood from what has been made so that people are without excuse. My friend, I want to challenge you today. If you're a Christ follower, I want to encourage you. We should not be intimidated by science, academia, by university, by smart. Why? Because these people are now coming to see. The further we look through a telescope, the deeper we look through a microscope, we see the hand of God. Scientists may not ascribe to the Christian God. They may talk about some, higher form, some being, but we know, as the Apostle Paul said 2,000 years ago, that the fingerprint of God is in everything he's created. Not just in mountains and valleys and stars and planets, but his fingerprint is on your life. Why? Because we're told that you are made with a purpose. On purpose. For purpose. Your life has value. Your life has worth. Your time on this earth is not an accident. God put you here. I want to encourage you, if you're a Christ follower, that we can stand with our head held high and we can defend what we believe because the world is changing. And if you're here and you're not a Christ follower and you're maybe a skeptic or agnostic and this is new information to you, I want to challenge you to test what you believe. Don't just take a line from a popular TV show. If you already believe this stuff, then understand it. I challenge you to ask yourself, is this worth staking your life on? Or could there be, as we journey throughout this series, next week look at all the reasons people believe the Bible is not true, and then as we look at evil and suffering, and then of course sex. Maybe, just maybe, the blindness that you're blind to is withholding you from truth. And my prayer, as we close today, is that God will continue to make clear that we could see his hand in all things. And that we, not with a condescending spirit, but with a loving spirit, can defend what we believe in. Because science is not against the church. There's no problem of science. Science is proving more and more and more and more than what has been made has been made. It didn't just come to be, it was made on purpose for a purpose. Amen? Let's pray. I invite you to stand as we pray.